Hello and welcome to the Learning to See podcast. I'm Jen Allward, your host, and today I get to introduce you to Shelley Henk of Whole Soul Studio, who combines her knowledge of medicine, nutrition, faith, and art to help people creatively heal their whole being and rewrite their stories. Today she shares a bit of her own story of how trauma and stress impacted her physical health and ultimately helped her create Artful Storywork as the foundational principle and process to her beautiful School of You curriculum. Look in the show notes below for some helpful links, and remember, to get access to all the bonus content like videos, downloads, and inspiring and helpful links, art prompts and reflection questions, etc., pop on over to Patreon and check out the different membership opportunities available at Learning to See Studio. Okay, are you ready? Let's jump on in and learn to see how making art can help us connect all the parts of ourselves and find healing with our heart, mind, body, and soul. Well, hey, Shelley, thanks so much for being willing to chat with us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and for those who don't know you, can you tell us just a smidge about who you are and where you're located?
Yes. So my name is Shelley Henk, and I am located in the Midwest in central Illinois. My work is at the intersection of science and spirit and art. So I call myself the artist of the soul just because it's a very broad the work that I do. I mix holistic health with artistry.
Yeah, it's been really fun to watch your art grow and grow, like in your talents. And you have some retreats and things coming up.
Actually, it's not a retreat, but I do have a school actually, the Finding Beautiful School of You, which is really my main container where all of my work is held. And inside the Finding Beautiful School of You is kind of where you unlock all of the other things that I do. So that's where you'll find retreats and in person things and private coaching and things like that. But I really like to kind of have a container to hold all of the things that I do. And that is the Finding Beautiful School of You. And we'll be launching a cohort coming up very soon. And it's a 12-week cohort. And then that leads into 12 months of support where we have Saturday soul sessions. So once a month for 12 months, we meet virtually to get into the studio, do our artful story work, which is my main method that I created. And that's really the main place where things happen.
That's so cool. So, two things there. I was curious if I think people would be interested to know how you got into this. And then if you could share a little bit more about what that artful story work actually looks or is like, what are the steps of it?
Yeah, absolutely. How did I get into this? Well, let's see. I got to make this story short. It's always a long story, isn't it? Well, I actually had a health breakdown of my own. I was a nurse, a traditional nurse, but I always say I became a nurse, but I was born an artist. And I was actually talked out of going to art school by my guidance counselor in high school. But that's what I wanted to do. That's what I always wanted to do. And I ended up going to nursing school because he told me I needed to get a real degree and get a real job that could pay real money.
Oh, it's sad. I was just talking with some other friends recently, and we were talking about how there have been so many great artists in our lives, like people that we know, that have been talked out of following their passion and their talent in art by art teachers and school counselors.
Yeah.
So I think just maybe a word of caution to all of us to remember we have a lot of influence over people and to be
Yeah,
conscious on that front. Yeah.
that is so true. Like, yeah, because I didn't know, at the time, like I just thought like he's the man that's supposed to this is what he does, like he's supposed to know. Right, so I listened to him and I went to school. So with my dreams of going to art school crushed, I was really directionless because I'm like that's the only thing I ever wanted to do, so I don't know, right? But what I did know was that I always wanted to help people heal through art. I wanted to, back then, I would say save the world, right? Which is very egotistical thing to say, actually, now that looking back on it. But in my
We
naive,
never have small dreams.
right, yeah, in my naiveness at 18 years old, that was my, I knew I wanted to make an impact in people's life. I was very empathetic. I always wanted to end suffering. And actually, when I was about 12 years old, I write this in my book that there was something injustice happening on the TV, and I was infuriated by it. And I was telling my brother, my older brother, that's not right, and somebody needs to do something about this, like suffering, people suffering. And he said, "What are you going to do, Shelley? Open the Save the World Foundation?" And I said, "You never know. I just might." So so that was like always me. I was very like kind of fiery and didn't like people suffering and wanted to help and serve and things like that. But I wanted to do that through art. So I became a nurse. And actually, what I found out was when you live out of alignment with who you truly are, it makes you sick. So I worked as a nurse for about 18 years. And during that time, I actually got sick myself. And I had ended up having like full health breakdown, wasn't able to work for about a year. And it was during that time that the Lord called me into serving in a different capacity. Once I kind of saw the other side, outside healing outside of the medical model, it awakened me to a whole world. And so I went back to school, became a whole health educator, became trained in alternative health practices, and became an alternative health practitioner. And did that for about 7 years. And then during COVID, stretched me another, woo, COVID was stretching. Right. I was leading a large team of health coaches. I was coaching collectively between me and my team. We were collectively helping about 1,000 people during that time with their health. And it really stretched me a lot. And of course, we're helping people navigate towards trauma, crisis, all of this. And I started to recognize in our clients my story, because I had went through incredible amounts of trauma in medicine and in my personal life that pushed me to the edge, which is actually what made my health break down. And so I started to recognize like people are going through collective trauma. That's what this is. Like everybody in the world was like, what is happening? They're seeing all these symptoms. And me being trauma informed, not just clinically, but from a personal perspective, like I lived through trauma, I healed trauma. And that is why I became a whole health educator, to help people through high amounts of stress and trauma and the dramas and traumas of life. Right. So I started to see like that is actually the truth of what's happening. And so I began to pray and ask and seek the Lord, like, how do I help people through this? How do I help myself through this? Because I was being stretched and re traumatized myself during COVID. Right. And that's when my proprietary framework, Artful Storywork, was really the seeds of it was birthed. And so I've spent the last 5 years developing that and kind of offering that to the world. So I kind of moved from, it is still health and wellness, but it's doing it through an artful lens. So that's kind of the very long and condensed version of how I got here.
That's great. One thing I was thinking is the journey matters, right? We talked about in the beginning, you said like you had this big dream, you want to save the world. And I
Yeah,
think God never gives us tiny dreams,
right.
and we have to rely on Him to see them come to fruition. You know,
Totally. Yeah. I
I've
call
mentioned
them
like,
God-sized dreams. They're the dreams,
yeah,
like there's dreams like, oh, I want to buy a house or I want to get a car, like the superficial dreams, but like God-sized dreams, those are the dreams that you can't accomplish them on your own in your own strength at all. So,
right? And sometimes He takes us through a journey that seems terrible, like
yeah,
going into nursing, having a health and emotional crisis, and then starting something new. Like our pastor is just talking about Joseph. We forget in the Bible, it's, a couple pages, a couple
right.
chapters. It's quick, quick, quick. We know the story. It's all okay. But it was 13 years from when his brothers threw him in the pit and sold him off into slavery. Then he was a slave and he was in jail, and rotten jail back then, bad stuff.
Yeah.
And
I
then out of the blue one day,
mhm.
he's the second in command.
Yeah.
And we forget that that whole journey brings us, and I think it's just really cool that your story of pain has been redeemed, and this is how you find healing for you, and this is how you help others heal as well. What
Mhm.
might be some indicators for other people to connect with, like, hey, you're not living in alignment?
Mm,
Like there's something more here. There's
mhm,
something maybe you need to attend to. And
mhm.
then the second part of that is what might be your favorite art technique that you have seen be really helpful.
Yes. So indicators are your body and your bank account always tell on you. So I have a saying, when your head and heart disagree, your body and your bank account tell on you. Right. And then we go off to the doctor and we call up the doctor, make our little doctor appointment, right? We go to the doctor and we tell the doctor all about our physical symptoms, right? And they say, "Oh yeah, here's a pill, right? Here's a pill for that." And they give you a diagnosis and you're like, "Oh, I have this, right? And here's my pill for this." And that's not the truth of how what's going on most of the time. So it's always usually showing up in a physical symptom. Um, all the autoimmune conditions is a huge one. Migraines, stomach problems, IBS, weight gain. Even now to this day, I know I'm getting in more stressful, like things I need to tend to, like when I start eating kind of crazy. you know, I'm craving things that I don't normally, I'm wanting to eat, out of balance, things like that. Um, Sleeping too much, your sleep is often disrupted, or you're sleeping too much or too little, you're irritable, um, heart racing, palpitations, eyes twitching. Those are all really big indicators. I developed one of the things that I was diagnosed with was POTS syndrome. Again, they love to give fancy diagnoses. So then you have your label and then you can own and identify with that label. And I think that's really destructive, actually, because once you identify and you make that thing, that pathology, your identity, you've already you're in trouble, because it's going to be a long road, because you think that's your problem, right? Anxiety, depression, all the mental health conditions, those are also big indicators, which I had most of all of those things, actually. One of everything. And that is your indicator, like your body. And then the other thing is like your bank account, like you're getting into debt, you're overspending, things like that is chaotic, because it's all really at the root of all of those things is dysregulation. So it's a nervous system that's dysregulated and in a fight or flight or stress response most of the time. Yeah.
Wild scramble trying to find a solution to how you're feeling, like fill that gap.
Right, right. And like I said, I think one of the biggest problems is that in our culture, in more indigenous cultures and more primitive type cultures, they understand that the emotions are connected to the body. And that's really the heart of my work now, is emotional, really understanding our emotional language, which I think, gosh, God, that's really smart to have an artist teaching, the emotional language and how that affects your body, because I feel like artists are like, that's what we do. We're translating emotion onto the canvas most of the time. And it's about a disconnection. So when we're disconnected from our body, from God, from nature, all of those symptoms are what end up happening. It's just in America, like I said, you go to the doctor and then we give it a diagnosis and then we give it a pill. And now it's something outside of us that we don't have any control over, versus something that's within us that we absolutely do have control over. But nobody's pointing us into that right direction. So, um, anyway, there's Dr. Bernie Siegel. He worked a lot with cancer patients. He wrote a book called Love, Miracles, and Medicine, which was the book that I read in my whole health education that awakened me, like really awakened me to this whole concept. And I started to understand what was happening on a deeper level. So that's a really powerful book for anybody that is kind of interested in, especially, like I said, for cancer patients. So don't identify and make an identity out of your diagnosis, or you probably will never be healed.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Your
Mhm.
identity. Sometimes the labels can be helpful for getting you the right services in certain cases. And other times
Mhm.
it just starts separating you, like dissecting you. And you mentioned
Yeah.
dysregulation, but as you were talking about that, I'm like, yeah, we're so good at like dissecting and pulling ourselves apart and looking at your hand, your twitchy eye, your irritable instead of the whole.
Right, exactly. And then you get a doctor for your hand, and a doctor for your stomach, and a doctor for your heart palpitations, and a doctor for your migraines, and you're split. That's exactly what happened to me. I had a full-time job going to the doctor. Literally, I had every test known to man. I had 2 surgeries. I mean, it was wild. And that's exactly what we do, is we split ourselves up into parts, right? Even to the point of separating, even in the spiritual realm, like spiritual communities, we separate body, soul, spirit, as if they're 3 separate things. They're not 3 separate things. They're 3 things in one whole, and that is you. So
Exactly. We got to
the
heal the
language,
whole identity.
yeah, the language matters a lot. And so my degree and what I do is I look at the whole picture of you, whole health, right? And even alternative practitioners, a lot of times, like I have a friend who's an herbalist. That's great. I love herbs. I love, he is like a master herbalist, and I go to him for imbalance. But he still has a very clinical mindset in that he's matching the symptom with the herb and then prescribing the herb, educating on the herb so that you can take it, because he's not a doctor and he can't prescribe things. His language matters.
Yes, language matters.
But that's still a very clinical way of looking at things. And actually, that was the medicine. Like when you went to the pharmacy 100 years ago, that was the medicine you would have received. That would have been very normal. The herbalist was the pharmacist. Okay. Just so you guys, if you guys don't know that. But that's not what I do. What I do is I'm looking at the whole picture. Again, genius for God to have an artist to look at the whole picture, right? Like, that's pretty smart.
All the colors, all the layers, perspective, composition.
Yep. And that's literally the lens that when I'm helping somebody with their health and their life, creating their dreams, because I do all of that, that's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at the entire picture, and it all boils down to disconnection versus connection. And so when we begin to see, like, oh, our heart is connected to our hands, and our brain is connected to our stomach, it all starts to make sense. There's one story that's usually wanting to be told. And if you follow that story, you'll find the actual root.
And that is key, getting to the root.
Yes.
Attention long enough to the whole story, all those little pieces, and then you get to the root. That
Yeah.
is
Yeah, and that's where I developed my favorite art technique, is incorporated in with my Artful Storywork method. So with Artful Storywork, that's exactly what we're doing. It's a 3-step process. It's very simple. Once you learn it, you can do it yourself. It's a skill that you can use over and over again for past things that have happened, right? And current things that you're going through right now. You can use it. So the 3 steps are unearthing the story, cultivating the story, and creating a new story. And that's the 3 steps. And it's super simple. But as far as the art technique that we use, I like anything. I like texture, a lot of texture. So I love using like plaster and earthy textures to lay down the first layer, because I feel like that's our life, right? Is texture. There's lots of layers to it, right? So I like actually starting with something that's very textural and where you're not using brushes at all, because the majority of my clients that I work with are not artists. They would say to you, I couldn't draw a stick figure if I tried. That's what they would say. I'm not creative, and I'm like, no, yeah, actually you are. I'm going to show you how you are. And so getting them not using paint, but using colored plaster works really great for them. And then using their hands or tools that are not paintbrushes for that first layer. And then
Yeah,
I kind
that really helps break
of,
through some of that resistance and do the bottom up work and the embodiment of
hmm
getting your whole body engaged in this process, not worrying about, "Oh, I have to make something pretty."
yes, it helps to kind of get your mind out of that left side analytical into the right side, more creative side of thinking. And then I think another thing that I really like to do with people is give them boundaries. And it sounds crazy because I think that a lot of people think art, oh, it's free spirited and there's no rules and da da da. You know what I mean? Which is true to a degree, because I actually like art because of that. But I find that when we could give ourselves boundaries, and I say, okay, you're going to use these three colors, and we're only going to use a 12 by 12 canvas. So you've got 12 by 12 canvas, and you've got these three colors and your plaster, and you can't use a paintbrush. Okay. Like, you got to get creative. You got to think outside the box, because that's actually part of where we're getting into the deeper stuff, is by not doing it the traditional way that we think painting happens. So when I tell them that, oh, you can only use these three colors, you can mix it, and like, you can mix different however you want, right? But you can only use this, and it has to be on this size canvas. Then all of a sudden it feels like freedom, because there's boundaries. And I think that's such a beautiful metaphor for life too.
It really is. There's freedom in the limitations. Once we acknowledge where those are, then there's actually a TED Talk I listened to quite a while ago. I think it's called Embrace the Shake. It's a great story. He started developing nerve pain,
Mm-hmm.
and he actually caused nerve damage because he was into pointillism.
Oh,
And so
okay.
his hand he developed a tremor that they
Oh,
couldn't fix. And the doctor said, well, just embrace it. And it
mm,
got him going on all these things like, how else can I like bring in these limits to my
right.
artistic thing? And he found that there's actually way more creativity when you limit yourself to just a little thing. Like, he
Mm-hmm.
went to a coffee shop one day and he said, what can I do with the pen I have and the
Uh-huh.
free cups that they give out when you ask for them?
Exactly.
He said,
It's much
and
freedom.
sometimes there's too many options out there. When you just narrow it in, all of
Mm-hmm.
a sudden you find a whole world because you're diving into that world. So yes, I think you're onto something with limit some of the things, and that gives
Mm-hmm.
us freedom to really explore more deeply and express ourselves more fully.
Yeah, exactly. And that even goes back to what I found with my work, that, and asking, okay, God, this is like what I know I'm supposed to be doing. This is the dream that you've given me to carry out. And I'm thinking like, okay, but I'm like this nurse, medical, whole health educator, like I've got this clinic, I do have a clinical side, right? But then it's like I have this creative side too. And how does that come together, and how do I explain that to people, because it's weird, like, how do I put that in a way that I can actually teach people and it be useful and help people, serve people, because there's a lot, I know a lot of things, a lot of modalities, a lot of ways and things like this. So I needed some boundaries. I needed some limitations in order to move forward, because I there was a point where I was like getting really overwhelmed, and then I couldn't figure out exactly how to bring the dream alive. And that's when he showed me the Artful Storywork method. And so it's like, when you work with me, that is my three colors and my 12 by 12 canvas, right? You're getting Artful Storywork. Now, there are variations within Artful Storywork, which is just three steps. It's unearth the story, cultivate the story, create a new story. Doesn't matter if we're working on health or we're working on bringing a business forth, healing a marriage, healing physical health, healing your bank account, healing your business. It doesn't matter. It's all the same method. So it works really well. And every time I do it, I am astonished at how well it works.
Isn't that awesome to watch that happen? You're like, oh, every time.
Yeah, it's like surprised by it every time it happens. It's fun.
Yeah. Do you have any stories that you'd be able to Tell like about one small process that would help people kind of understand like, okay, so I get my hands dirty with texture. I'm limited to size and number of colors.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how does that bring about a story that helps me get to the root and bring this dream or bring this healing into fruition?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and the cool thing is you can do it with just a pen and a pencil and paper too, right? We can get fancy and we can like go as far as making like art for your house. And then you have almost like a prophetic artwork that you can hang on your wall that you know what the story is. Or it can be as simple as just a white piece of paper and a pencil. So there's a lot of freedom in the technique, but I will give you the first step that I think is really important, especially for people who are healing an upheaval, a trauma, a drama, working through something that's emotional and heavy. Is that the first thing that I actually tell people to do is actually engage the body, not the mind. I believe that you have to work with the body first before you can access the mind. And I know that's traditionally, and a lot of people believe that, you know, mind over matter, like you fix the mind, right? And then the body follows.
Which is maybe why we've gotten into dysregulation problems.
Right. Right. I find that the body is actually quite loud. Okay. So, I mean, have you ever tried to think your way out of fainting? You know, have you ever tried to think your way out of, like, if you get in a car accident or something, out of your heart rate going up? Like, no, you've probably never been able to think your way out of doing that. I do agree that the mind is super powerful, but I think we have to work in order. And I believe that the body, if we can engage the body first, it actually works much better. And so tuning into the body, like doing a body scan and asking, like, what feels tight in my body? Where is my awareness being drawn to in my body? What am I feeling? And each area of your body and certain feelings and sensations in your body are actually linked to different emotions. So a lot of people, especially people who have went through trauma, if you ask them how they feel, they can't tell you. And sometimes they're not even aware they're having a feeling because they've disassociated from their body so well in order to survive. They don't even realize that their body, that like almost like that they don't even have a body in a way, like they're all in the mind because it's safe in the mind, but the body doesn't feel safe to them. So we tune in and we listen to the body. And then what I have you do in the unearthing stage is we're not analyzing the story. We're not, none of that at this point, right? We're just going, what does the body feel when we're engaging this story, when we even think about this story, and what is coming up? And then what are the cells doing? So, kind of funny because as a nurse, you know, we look at everything under the microscope, right? We look at the cells under the microscope. Well, with my technique, I actually ask you if you could examine the cells, like say if you're feeling pressure in your heart, if you could examine the cells in your heart, and if we could put them under a microscope, I want you to draw them now.
Oh, that is interesting.
Yeah. And let the cells speak. So I always say that, you know, we have to engage the cell and we have to engage the story because emotions are actually real things in your actual body. They're not in your mind, they are in your actual body. They are actual real things, molecules that can actually be measured and even seen on scans, which is kind of crazy.
It is. I remember seeing stuff when people are looking at tears
Yes.
with a microscope for tears for grief,
Mm-hmm.
trauma, sadness.
Yeah.
They're all different.
Yes, the body is wildly amazing. There's so much to it, you know, and yeah, so if we're using the plaster, I will actually have them put the plaster on, then I'll actually have them carve the cells into the plaster.
Nice. I was wondering if you ever did any carving back into the
Yeah.
texture that you had. Very
Yeah.
cool.
So if we're doing pen and paper, then I just have them draw it out. So that's the first step.
That's cool.
Yeah, I think you have to engage the body first. And if you can tune into your body and then express what the body is trying to say, because it is definitely, the body has a language. It's trying to speak to you. That's actually what symptoms are. There's a great wisdom in your body, and it's trying to tell the truth. The body's the truth teller, but the mind, it can make up lies.
It rationalizes, it justifies. We try to ignore a certain thing. It can deny things that are like, how did you deny that?
Yeah.
How obvious. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
The
what I
bottom.
like about this first step is it's so gentle for people who are showing any resistance. It's like you don't have to get right to the root. You just do it the
Mhm.
first thing, like what pops up? What color do you like? Like
Yeah.
what texture feels right now? And just go with it. And it
Hmm.
naturally, safely like brings you to those next levels and the next questions and the next steps.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Is anybody feeling encouraged and curious enough to go give this a try? I hope you'll do it, and let us know what that experience is like for you. But do please remember, this is just the first of 3 steps in Artful Storywork. Please join us next week for Transformational Studio Time to hear more about this process, how Shelley got saved in the cadaver room, and how we can engage our stories of pain, drama, and trauma with God at the center to overcome spiritual bypassing and unlock true healing.